Mine.
Oh, all ready? Good evening and welcome again to the Legal and Planning Committee meeting. Before we begin, on behalf of all those present, I acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet, the Cammeraygal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. This meeting is being recorded and made publicly available on Council's website. Those present should refrain from making any defamatory statements. By attending the meeting, you are giving consent to your image and voice being webcast. I move now to apologies or leave of absence. There's been a request for a leave of absence from Councillor Berrigie. Could I have a mover? Councillor Welsh. And a seconder, Councillor Santa. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Are there any other apologies or leaves of absence requested? No. Are there any disclosures of interest? No. So on that basis, we'll move to the first item, the confirmation of the minutes of the last previous meeting. Which was held on the 11th of October. So I'd request that those councillors who were part of the previous council move and second that, Councillor Mutton and Councillor Drummond, if you would, because you were present.
Thanks.
Moved by Councillor Drummond, seconded by Councillor Mutton. All those in favour? Unanimous. We move now to item 4.1, the ministerial order, planning. Is there a mover of the recommendation or another motion? Yep. Yeah, I will. I've been kindly reminded by the General Manager, this is a committee meeting rather than an ordinary meeting of council. The Code of Meeting Practice applies. But it's to be encouraged that that we have a discussion and a debate on the items that are before us. Ideally, I would like a motion so that we can then open the debate and the discussion and any questions that you may have of council staff. Is there a mover for a motion? Councillor Mutton moves the recommendation. Is there a seconder? Councillor Welsh. Are there any questions, comments, discussion on the item? None from the floor. I think I'm reluctant from the chair, but I think we should have some sort of comment about this, in that this is another impost from the state government, I think, on councils and local planning. And so I'm glad that you have moved the recommendation, because really what it's moving towards is to punish local government if it isn't meeting the expectations or the diktat of the state government. Is there any other comment or questions or questions of council staff in relation to this item?
Could we just pause for a moment? I'm just having trouble getting the document up on my
screen. So perhaps while we're waiting for Councillor Mutton, I might just say, if you go to page 5 of 68 of the report, I think it's really problematic that the state government is moving to this position where they're going to use processing times as the potential to take council's powers away altogether, and to allow others to exercise our planning functions. This is part of a pattern that we're going to see in other items tonight, and we've certainly seen with the provisions about development contributions that that we really need to be standing up and guarding against. Councillor Spenceley.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with that, Mayor. I think this is mirroring what's happened with the planning proposals. It's continual erosion of our discretion over development in our area.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, if I could just make comment as well, and Mr Hill might want to say something here. Could we just point out from an operational perspective, this adherence to these timeframes causes other problems in the planning process. Our process is somewhat iterative with the applicant. So we generally try to provide an opportunity for the applicant. If there's something in an application that's not in a position to be approved, then there's a capacity for exchange effectively between our planners and the developer to encourage them to alter their application. Of course, the issue you have when you have the very strict time frame is the chances for having that iterative approach disappears. Basically, you get an application put in and you've got to determine on the application without being able to go back and try to find the variations that might allow an application to go through or might provide a better community outcome. And then what happens, of course, if it's refused, it goes straight to the court process. So the risk, I think, with a very strict time regime in the application process is we'll end up with a lot more items in court, which will, of course, cost our residents more money. And the opportunity to have an interactive approach to get a development across the line with potentially some compromises gets curtailed. That's the real challenge for this.
Can I put a question to the General Manager?
Certainly.
There is a mood in the community that these development applications have been gamed. There's instances where the development applications have stayed current for years. And look, my concern is that council is losing control of the process because people are able to extend it, if you like, year in, year out. The real question is how do we address that perception and how do we ensure that council does have control and that developers who put the applications in take the process seriously?
That one really goes, I think, towards reviewing the planning legislation and how it's applied and the roles that different people have. And there has been concerns with different parts of what you've just raised then. For example, I'm aware of concerns about an approval staying on foot once the construction has commenced, but without having a time frame and with the construction needs to be completed by, which causes some problems. But really addressing those matters to that type of breadth really requires a full review of the planning legislative regime, which of course rests with the state government.
Councillor Spenceley.
Question, if I may, to the General Manager or to Head of Planning. With the 40-day period, how would that affect community consultation on a development application, which is what, typically 4 weeks? So how would that actually...
I will pass that to Mr Hill.
Mayor and councillors, the 40 days will cover most of your development applications. So as soon as they're lodged, cleared through the planning portal, they go out onto consultation once we do our checks and balances. So the 14 days is encompassed within that 40 days to get it determined. The reality is that if someone wants an extension, we have a submissions policy that allows a 1-week extension. Similarly, the reality is that the planning officer may not get to the actual assessment until after the notification is closed, depending on workloads and that. So the very matter-of-fact document comes in, it's checked, goes to notification, is really unaffected by that 40-day deemed refusal.
The other thing about this is this is being proposed at a time when there's an acknowledged crisis in the planning community in the state. At the local government conference, the minister was suggesting that planners should be imported from overseas in the way we've imported nurses in order to meet the workload. We're certainly not the only metropolitan council that has had assessment planners leave and not be replaced because the market is, the state government's most poaching and paying more than councils ever can. And frankly, I think it's a cost shift because there is a need for staff to be allocated to meet those shorter timeframes without any concomitant proposal to provide for a fee to raise development application statutory fees and the like. So not only is this about putting pressure on council and a big stick to say if you don't meet the times that we mandate, we'll take your planning powers away. It's also a big impost on the organisation in terms of servicing those mandates. If there isn't any other debate or questions, we have a motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. We'll move to the next item, 4.2, the Department of Planning and Environment discussion paper and new approach to rezonings. Before we begin on this incredible discussion paper, is there a motion? The recommendation is calling for us to endorse the submission at attachment 1. Is anyone prepared to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Is there a seconder? Councillor Burke. I open the floor to discussion and questions. Is that Councillor Welsh? Did you? No. Councillor Mutton, are you indicating? I might kick it off. This is outrageous. This is turning the entire strategic planning regime in this state on its head. This is saying that all that careful local strategic planning that we've undertaken, and we have undertaken it, that's embodied in our strategic planning statement, in our local housing strategies, and then through to the precinct planning that we've done in various locations, but particularly as embodied in the Crows Nest St Leonard's plans, the educational precinct planning study, and as finally embodied in our local environmental plan, community consulted and understood, will now be at the whim of speculation. And instead of council controlling the process, it will be the proponents, the developers. So a rezoning is a change to the LEP, and that won't be within our control. And even more so, it purports to be trying to stop ad hoc spot rezonings. I think it will result in the entirely opposite, which is to turn speculative applications for increasing yield and height and upzonings into play, totally undermining our careful strategic planning, because the most shocking part of this is the proposal that it'll be appealable to the Land and Environment Court. There's very good reason why the Land and Environment Court has never had a jurisdiction for strategic planning, because it cannot do the holistic overview and the understanding of those strategic controls across the whole of the local government area on an ad hoc site-by-site basis. The court, I'm sure, doesn't want this, but we should be outraged on behalf of our community, because this is another blow to local planning powers in local hands proposed by the state government. That's my position on it.
That position's really clear. Look, we have a number of processes that lead us to adopt plans, however you might define them. And suddenly we're finding the processes are being marginalised. That's bad, but they're being marginalised to a court that a court rarely takes into account community interests. When we come up with, however we define our plans, we come up with those plans as a result of a community consultation process. That then is embraced by the council, and that is our community talking. To simply put that process to the side and say the court can make a final determination, I think is just wrong. So,
And it's worse than that, Councillor Mutton. The community consultation part of this is to be undertaken by the developer. It isn't to be undertaken by the council. The council comes in after that. And so not even that portion is provided by an organisation such as a council, which is there to serve the public interest. It's undertaken by the proponent.
do you know what really disturbs me is that you go out and talk in the street about what's going on, and the community's got absolutely no idea that they're elected councillors, that the council is no longer having final say. It has no understanding that this is all now, if you like, being passed across to the courts. And it's not the way the process should work.
Any other comment, questions? Okay. We have a motion. Move the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. We move now to item 4.3, the Holt Avenue Properties Interim Heritage Orders. There's a recommendation. Is there a mover for the recommendation that you're open for? Councillor Spenceley. Is there a seconder? Councillor Santa. Is there any comments, questions, debate? Councillor Spenceley.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I'd just like to draw attention to the fact that I think there was a great deal of comment around the fact that multiple studies had been done on these properties. And I draw your attention to my comment at the time, which is if you seek to ask a question that says, is there any reason to keep this property versus any reason to remove this property, the answers can vary quite significantly. So, I do welcome the fact that we have done this report. I do draw attention to the fact that the previous reports were lacking in their assessment. And I think this has been, a fantastic result. Thank you.
Fantastic. Oh, sorry, I thought that was me setting things up. No, yeah, just I think the community is very happy about this, and so I'm very pleased as well. Thanks.
Anything further? We have a motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. We move to item 4.4. Interim heritage order northern side of Parallel Street between Paling Street and McPherson Street. Is there a mover for moved by Councillor Gibson? Is there a seconder, Councillor Spenceley? Is there any questions, comments, debate? Councillor Spenceley.
Thank you, Mayor. I think my comment is that I'm glad to see we're actually getting this report underway. It does feel a little late given that the words urgent were used in the original motion. So I'm pleased that we now have this underway and that the residents and community around the sites will have an answer relatively soon on, and I hope relatively soon on, the assessment of those properties.
I'd endorse your comments. Are there any other comments, questions? Councillor Santa? No. We have a motion. All those in favour? Again, there's unanimous. We move to item 4.5, 6 John Street, McMahon's Point. There's a recommendation that the report be received. Is there a mover? Councillor Gibson. Is there a seconder? Councillor Santa. Are there any questions, comments, debate? And I wonder whether many of you received the correspondence from Friends of Berries Bay this afternoon, and certainly not only did they say they wish to support council in continuing to in this action, but they had a number of queries. Did anyone have any concerns about that correspondence?
I read it, but I think given the complexities of this site, that the staff are doing a good job with that, and we've got a very thorough report in front of us. I'm sure it's not all that the people that live in that community would like, but it is what it is. It's just turned into a neighbourhood in a way they should. It's quite, how much has it cost us so far in legal fees on this one?
Well, it's there at page 30.
A lot of money. We spent a lot of legal resources on this. And as I said, I think the staff are doing a good job on it.
Are there any other questions? Debate? There's a motion. All those in favour? It's unanimous. We'll move to item 4.6, variations to development standards, the reporting period for the first quarter. Again, there's a recommendation that the report be received. Is there a mover? Councillor Mutton?
Yeah.
Seconder? Councillor Burke? Is there any discussion? Councillor Gibson, is your light on?
No.
In the absence of any discussion, I move that we will put the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. We move to item 4.7, variations to development standards quarter 2 reporting period. Again, there's a recommendation the report be received. Is there a motion? Councillor Mutton, Councillor Burke. Is there any debate? Questions? Put the motion. All those in favour? Unanimous. Move to item 4.8, North Sydney Local Planning Panel report for the year 2020 to 2021. Again, there's a motion the report be received. Do I have a mover? Councillor Welsh, a seconder. Councillor Santa. Is there any discussion or questions about the report or the conduct of the panel? No. In the absence of any questions or comments, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Item 4.9, development applications received 1st of July to 30 September 2021 and 1 October to 31 December 2021. Again, there's a recommendation that the report be received. Is there a mover? Councillor Burke, seconder. Councillor Mutton. Are there any questions or comments? Move the item. All those in favour? That's unanimous. That takes us to the confidential matters. Is there any reason to close the meeting? Does anyone have anything they wish to discuss on the confidential items?
Yes, I think we should discuss.
Okay, Councillor Gibson. Is there a mover to close the meeting?
So you'll go into confidential matter? Yes, I'll move.
Okay, it's moved by Councillor Gibson, seconded by Councillor Mutton. The motion is to close the meeting to discuss the current appeals and results. All those in favour? That's unanimous. We've moved to close the meeting. Okay, we're back. There was a motion during the closed session that the current appeal results from March 2022 report be received, that the report be treated as confidential and remain confidential until council determines otherwise. That was supported unanimously. Councillors, that's the close of the meeting. Thank you for your attendance. And as you know, there's a briefing in the Ros Crichton Pavilion following the close.